I want to start with a moment that stops caregivers cold. You're in the middle of an ordinary evening. Nothing unusual is happening. And then the person you're caring for looks across the room, or toward the corner, or at the window, and begins talking to someone who isn't there. Or they turn to you, the person who has been caring for them with everything you have, and accuse you of stealing from them, of being a stranger, of plotting against them. And you don't know what to do. You don't know whether to correct them, whether to play along, whether to argue or comfort or redirect. You're caught completely off guard by something nobody prepared you for. If that moment has happened to you, or something like it, I want you to know two things right now before we go any further. What you witnessed is a recognized, documented symptom of Alzheimer's disease, and there are specific, research-informed ways to respond that make these moments less frightening and more manageable for both of you. Today we're drawing from the National Institute on Aging's guidance on hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia in Alzheimer's caregiving. This is some of the most practically important guidance for day-to-day caregiving, because these symptoms, when they appear, can be among the most emotionally destabilizing experiences in the entire caregiving journey. And I want to build towards something today that I think will fundamentally shift how you understand paranoia in particular. Because there's a connection between paranoia and memory loss that explains, with real clarity, why the person you love is accusing you of things you would never do. And that explanation changes everything about how you respond. Stay with me. Let's start with hallucinations, because these are often the symptom that most alarms caregivers when they first occur. A hallucination is when a person sees, hears, smells, tastes, or feels something that isn't actually there. In Alzheimer's, hallucinations most commonly involve seeing people, often people from the past, people who have died, people from childhood. The person may see their mother sitting in the corner. They may hear children playing in another room. They may feel insects on their skin. These experiences are completely real to the person having them. That is the most important thing to understand. The person is not pretending. They are not confused about the difference between real and imagined. Their brain is generating an experience that, from the inside, is indistinguishable from reality. Here's where most caregivers get it wrong in the moment. The instinct is to correct, to say there's no one there, or that's not real, or mom has been gone for 20 years. And that instinct comes from love, from wanting to ground the person in reality, to protect them from confusion. But the NIA's guidance is unambiguous. Do not argue about what the person with Alzheimer's sees or hears. Arguing doesn't work. It can't work, because the hallucination is neurologically real to the person experiencing it. Telling them it isn't real doesn't update their experience. It just creates a conflict between their reality and yours. And that conflict produces distress, agitation, and a breakdown of trust, all of which make the situation harder. What works instead is comfort. If the person seems frightened by what they're seeing or hearing, move closer. Speak calmly. Gently redirect attention to another room, to a simple activity, to something familiar and soothing. Your calm presence is the most powerful tool you have in these moments. There's also an important clinical step that the NIA emphasizes and that many caregivers don't know. Tell the person's doctor about the hallucinations or delusions, and specifically, discuss any illnesses the person has and the medications they're currently taking. This next detail changes everything about how you think about these symptoms. Sometimes hallucinations and delusions in a person with Alzheimer's are not caused by the disease itself. They can be caused by a medication side effect, by an infection, by dehydration, by a urinary tract infection, or by another medical condition. We discussed in a previous video how medical problems in people with Alzheimer's often show up as behavioral changes rather than physical symptoms. Hallucinations follow the same pattern. This means that new or suddenly worsening hallucinations, especially if they appear abruptly rather than gradually, warrant a medical evaluation. There may be a treatable cause, and if there is, treating it may significantly reduce or resolve the hallucinations. Do not accept new hallucinations as simply disease progression without bringing them to the healthcare team first. That clinical step is always the starting point. One practical and specific piece of guidance from the NIA: turn off the television when violent or disturbing programs are on. Because a person with Alzheimer's may not be able to reliably distinguish between what's happening on a screen and what's happening in the room. A news broadcast showing violence or a dramatic scene from a film may be processed as a real event occurring in the physical space. The television can become a source of hallucination-like experience, and removing that input removes that source of confusion and fear. Now let's talk about delusions. Because delusions are different from hallucinations in an important way, and understanding the difference helps caregivers respond more effectively. A delusion is a false belief that the person holds as true, not a sensory experience, a conviction. The person may be absolutely certain that their partner is being unfaithful, certain that a family member has been replaced by an imposter, certain that the food is being poisoned. Like hallucinations, these beliefs feel completely real from the inside. And like hallucinations, arguing with them does not help. The NIA's guidance on delusions is consistent. Don't argue about what's true. That doesn't mean you validate the delusion or pretend to believe it. It means you recognize that the argument itself is not a productive path. You can gently redirect. You can change the subject. You can move to a different environment. You can offer something the person enjoys. A photograph, a familiar object, a cup of something warm. These are not evasions. They are effective responses that reduce distress without creating conflict. The goal is not to correct the belief. The goal is to reduce the fear and distress that accompanies it. Now we arrive at the symptom that I think is the most emotionally painful for caregivers to navigate: paranoia. Paranoia in Alzheimer's is a specific form of delusion in which the person believes, without any basis, that others are mean, lying, unfair, or trying to harm them. They may become suspicious, fearful, or jealous of people they've known and trusted for decades, including you. Being accused of stealing by someone you're devoting your life to caring for. Being treated as a threatening stranger by someone who has known you for years. Having your every action viewed through a lens of suspicion and hostility. This is one of the most emotionally bruising experiences in Alzheimer's caregiving, and it happens not because the person has stopped loving you, but because of something specific happening in the brain that the NIA explains with unusual clarity. Paranoia in Alzheimer's is directly linked to memory loss, and when you understand the connection, the accusations make a different kind of sense. If a person forgets where they put their glasses, their brain still knows the glasses are missing. It needs an explanation, and without the memory of where the glasses were last placed, the only available explanation is that someone took them. Not as a deliberate, calculated conclusion, but as the brain's attempt to make sense of a gap it cannot fill with memory. If the person forgets that you are their caregiver, forgets the context that makes your presence in their home safe and explained, then you become, to their brain, an unidentified person in their private space. And an unidentified person in your private space is, reasonably, someone to be wary of. If they forget that directions you just gave them were meant to help, the experience of not knowing where to go, combined with your recent instruction, creates the impression that you deliberately confused them. The NIA frames this with a sentence I want to offer you directly. Paranoia may be the person's way of expressing loss. They blame and accuse because no other explanation makes sense to them. Sit with that for a moment. The accusations aren't about you. They're about what has been lost. The missing memory, the missing context, the missing ability to make sense of their own experience. And in the absence of those things, you become, painfully, unfairly, the explanation for the confusion. Understanding this doesn't make the accusation sting less in the moment, but it changes what you do with it, and it protects you from absorbing it as truth. We're now at the section of today's video I've been building toward. This is where I want to address something that is critically important, and that the NIA raises with genuine seriousness in its caregiving guidance. Not every suspicious or distrustful behavior in a person with Alzheimer's is paranoia. Some of it may be a genuine, accurate response to something that is actually happening. Older adults, and particularly older adults with cognitive impairment, who are less able to identify, report, or seek help for what is happening to them, are frequently targeted for elder abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial exploitation, and a person with Alzheimer's who is being abused may present with exactly the kind of suspicion, fear, and distrust that looks, from the outside, like paranoia. This is not a remote or theoretical concern. Elder abuse is a documented, widespread problem, and cognitive impairment significantly increases vulnerability to it because it reduces the person's ability to recognize abuse, to communicate about it, or to access help. The NIA's guidance on this is explicit. If you are a caregiver concerned about a person with Alzheimer's who is showing suspicious or distrustful behavior, especially if someone new has access to the person, or if there are changes in finances, in physical presentation, in behavior around specific individuals, take that seriously. Don't automatically file it under paranoia. Look for signs, unexplained injuries, sudden financial changes, fear or distress in the presence of specific people, changes in legal documents, withdrawal or fearfulness that wasn't there before. If you have genuine concerns about elder abuse, the healthcare team, adult protective services, or local law enforcement can help. Protecting someone who cannot protect themselves is among the most important responsibilities a caregiver carries. Let's bring everything together with practical actions rooted in what the research actually supports. The first is to always bring new or worsening hallucinations or delusions to the healthcare team before accepting them as simply disease progression. New symptoms may have treatable causes, medication effects, infections, dehydration. A clinical evaluation is the essential first step, every time. The second is to stop arguing and start redirecting. This applies to both hallucinations and delusions and paranoid accusations. Arguing doesn't update the person's experience. It creates conflict that increases distress. Gentle redirection to another room, a different activity, a familiar object, or a calming sensory experience consistently works better. You are not giving up on truth. You are choosing effectiveness over symbolic correctness. The third is to manage the environment proactively. Turn off news broadcasts and violent or upsetting television programs. Reduce stimulation that can be misinterpreted. Ensure the physical environment is safe, that the person cannot reach anything that could cause harm if they become agitated during a hallucination or paranoid episode. These preventive measures reduce the frequency and intensity of difficult episodes. The fourth is to hold the understanding of paranoia as memory loss grief, not personal attack. When you are accused of stealing, of being a stranger, of deception, remind yourself of what the NIA tells us. The person is trying to explain the inexplicable gap that memory loss has created. You are not the target of their hostility. You are the nearest available explanation for a confusion that has no better one. That reframe won't remove the hurt, but it will help you respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. And compassion in these moments is what actually helps. And the fifth, and I want to say this with genuine weight, is to stay alert to the difference between paranoia and legitimate fear. If something about the situation feels wrong, if specific people provoke disproportionate distress, if unexplained changes appear, take those signals seriously. Advocate for the person you're caring for with the same attentiveness you bring to every other aspect of their care. They are depending on you to see what they can no longer reliably report. Here's what I want you to carry with you from today. Hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia are among the most emotionally difficult symptoms of Alzheimer's caregiving. Not because they're the most physically demanding, but because they challenge the relational reality of who you are to the person you love. Being unseen, being accused, being treated as a threat by someone you are protecting and serving with everything you have. That is genuinely painful, and it deserves to be named as such, not minimized, not explained away, but acknowledged as one of the real and significant costs of this role. And within that pain, here is what the research offers you. These symptoms are the disease, not the person. They are the product of a brain working desperately to make sense of experience it can no longer reliably process. The person accusing you of stealing is the same person who loves you. They are simply lost in a gap that memory has left behind. Your calm, your compassion, your refusal to argue. These are not passive responses. They are the most active, skillful, protective things you can do in these moments. They reduce distress. They preserve safety. They keep the relationship intact in the only ways that are still possible. You are doing something extraordinary. Every day, in moments that most people will never fully understand. That matters. You matter. Before you go, here's something I want to plant in your mind for our next conversation. We've been moving through this series with focus on the person with Alzheimer's, their symptoms, their needs, their care. But there's a dimension of caregiving that I haven't yet given its own dedicated, honest space. It's about what this experience does to you. Specifically, the accumulating emotional weight of caregiving, the grief, the identity loss, the compassion fatigue, the complicated feelings that don't fit neatly into any category, and the specific, research-informed approaches that can genuinely help. Caregiver mental health is not an afterthought in the research on Alzheimer's caregiving. It's a documented, urgent, and addressable concern. And you deserve a conversation that treats it that way. That's coming next. And if you want to be there, if you want to keep getting honest, compassionate, grounded guidance on every dimension of this journey, subscribe to this channel. Take very good care of yourself, because the person in your care needs you whole, and so do you.